community.
What you can't forget is that we are in the middle of a forest, in a jungle really, and they're attempting to keep these men alive.
Thousands of people are evacuated as wildfires get close to Athens and record temperatures rise across 3 continents. We're entering a new era. Experts praise a new Alzheimer's drug which slows the progression of the disease.
It might be a little bit too late for Dad now with regard to treatment, but I just hope that this news today that other families can benefit.
Also tonight, Putin promises retribution after accusing Ukraine of another attack on the bridge linking Russia and Crimea. And is this the new bright star of British tennis, the 17-year-old from Wolverhampton who became the boys' Wimbledon champion? And we'll take a first look at tomorrow's front pages. That's coming up in our press preview from 10:30. Hello, good evening. Myanmar has been gripped by civil war for decades. The towns, cities and even the jungle are now a battlefield. A Sky News team has been inside Myanmar and witnessed how civilian communities are being targeted daily with artillery and aerial bombardments, forcing them to flee their homes. This story has been largely untold, the international community failing to supply aid or assistance to the people of Myanmar. Well, in February 2021, Myanmar's military seized power in a coup, halting the country's transition towards a more democratic system. Military officials justified the coup by alleging widespread fraud in the 2020 election, won by the party of long-time democracy campaigner Aung San Suu Kyi. Well, in response, thousands of civilians took to the streets in mass protests, which were violently suppressed. The National Unity Government, a shadow government, was formed, and resistance groups like the People's Defence Force joined ethnic armed militias in their fight against the military. Well, the military junta currently controls most of the main cities and roads in central Myanmar, but rebel forces are beginning to win back territory in the verdant jungles. Well, Sky News travelled across the southeastern states of Karen, Karenni and Shan. Our chief correspondent, Stuart Ramsay, reports now on Myanmar's hidden war. A warning that tonight's report includes images of serious injuries and dead bodies.
You just can't get used to this. The screams of agony as wounds are dressed. The agony of limbs lost in a war that's tearing Myanmar apart. This is the brutal reality of life here. Indiscriminate shelling and missile attacks on civilians and resistance fighters alike. This is Myanmar today. A Myanmar its military rulers don't want the world to see, but we have. The injured keep coming. A secret hospital hidden in the jungle. The volunteers surround the latest victims and hurry them into the meagre emergency ward. These men and women are all city guys. Their home is now the jungle. Dealing with severe emergencies hourly is the life they've chosen. It's like a conveyor belt of horror, and it never stops. Whereas there's 5 patients that are now being brought in from the battlefield. It's really, really busy in here, but incredibly calm, however. What you can't forget is that we are in the middle of a forest, in a jungle, really, and they're attempting to keep these men alive. They've been patched up before they got here in the sort of recovery areas, but this is where the real business needs to be done. There's another casualty just coming through the door now. He's on a stretcher. As I say, it's busy, and they're trying to find beds for him. He's on a drip. This is real, hardcore emergency medicine in the hardest of circumstances. It's organised chaos like any emergency room, but this is in a jungle. All medical supplies are limited.
The right side of the brain is severely damaged by this shrapnel.
So you'll be doing brain surgery today?
Maybe, but his survivor is a little hope because both pupil is dilated and fixed. There is not a good sign for him.
This is a fight for life, and the odds of winning are stacked against them, but every day they beat those odds. Day and night. Every day. There is no single battlefield in this civil war, and it's brutal. Fighting in the jungle and on the streets of towns. A rescue team's trying to get to a casualty. They're under fire. It's right on them. He's whisked away to a casualty collection point just a short distance from the fighting. The medics ignore the threat of incoming mortars and fight to help the man who is badly wounded. They're losing him. Frantically, they try to keep him conscious. He is drifting away. But they keep working on the wounds. Well, fighting's been going on for hours now. Casualties been brought forward. It's only a couple of kilometres up the road. They're trying to give emergency treatment. We believe this man hit a landmine, stepped on a landmine. They're trying to stabilise him, get him off to the last hospital that's still operating in this area. But it's been a lot of fighting for quite a few hours now. And as I say, it's only just up the road. They stabilise him, patch him up and send him to the hospital for surgery. He survived. The military coup here 2 years ago put the junta back in power and reignited the civil war. We lived with the resistance forces in the jungle for a month. We witnessed the sheer scale of the suffering by civilians, bombed out of their homes, forced to flee. In some areas, nearly everyone is displaced. The resistance fighters are their only hope. They are determined, but only a few are well armed. However, they do have successes. In a newly captured position, they lead us to the summit of a hill, the last stand of a government unit. At the top, the bodies of government soldiers remain where they were killed. A macabre reminder of an awful war. Local commanders like Maui, leading the fight against the Myanmar regime, question why the world helps Ukraine, but does nothing to help them.
It's nothing different from Ukraine. Russia's big thing, like Ukraine's like minority. Ukraine also fight for their autonomy, fight for their future. The same thing. I fight for my own future. I fight for my generation futures.
There's a civil war raging here, whatever the military junta says. And like other conflicts around the world, there is no end in sight. But here, it's a war taking place largely out of sight. And that's exactly what the government wants. Stuart Ramsay, Sky News, Myanmar.
Well, following the coverage by Stuart, the United Nations Special Rapporteur on the situation of human rights in Myanmar has responded to the war.
We're not going fast enough with these measures. And number two, they're not coordinated. They're not linked together into a coherent strategic whole. So we've seen some encouraging signs, encouraging steps beyond just the rhetoric from some countries. But what we need is see more of this.
And tonight, the Foreign Office has released a statement condemning the violence in Myanmar. Since the coup in February 2021, the UK has announced heavy sanctions on the military leadership, led on the first UN Security Council resolution on Myanmar, which urges a de-escalation in violence, and provided more than £120 million in humanitarian and development assistance. Well, we will have more coverage from inside Myanmar over the coming days, including a special programme with me and Stuart Ramsay tomorrow at 9 p.m. here on Sky News. Now, the heatwave across Europe is continuing to intensify. Last week, many areas reached temperatures of well into the 40s. This week, there are serious health concerns as temperatures could top 50 degrees. Near Athens, forest fires have started to threaten tourist spots. Thousands of people have been evacuated. The extreme temperatures aren't just confined to Europe, though. The heatwave has hit places across the world. Sky's climate change and energy correspondent Hannah Thomas-Peter reports from Sardinia.
A large fire burns near power lines just south of Athens in Greece. High temperatures and gusts of wind fanning the flames. Over 1,000 children have been evacuated from summer camps in the area. And visitors and residents in several seaside resorts have been told to get out.
The forces of the fire brigade have dealt with 81 forest fires in the last 24 hours. Most were treated immediately at their initial stage. At the moment, we're dealing with 4 large fires. The fire from its start, due to the strong winds, covered 12 kilometres in 2 hours.
On the island of La Palma in Spain, it is a similar picture. Helicopters joining the fight to control a large blaze. The heatwave gripping southern Europe has been unrelenting. In Italy, officials are urging people to stay indoors in the heat of the day. Although at the peak of tourist season, many will choose not to. In Sardinia, the only place to be is in the water. Temperatures will surge again here in the coming days.
Europe's highest ever recorded temperature was 48.8 degrees Celsius. That was set on the island of Sicily 2 years ago. The forecasts suggest that record could potentially be broken here on Sardinia, where the temperatures are already up to 10 degrees above average for this time of year.
This region is well used to handling heat, but scientists say that climate change is making this sort of weather worse.
In a sense, I mean, if you look back at 2003, which at that time felt as being an extreme heat wave and affected France, Italy, Spain, and other European regions, at that time, that was extreme. And climate scientists then said, you know, in the 2020s, this sort of extreme would become actually more commonplace, more frequent. And exactly what we're seeing now.
It's not just Europe. All over the world, records are being challenged or broken. This town in northwest China recording a temperature of over 52 degrees on Sunday, the nation's hottest ever. And in the southern part of the US, over 100 million people, nearly a third of the country's population, find themselves under heat warnings. Another sign of a world being reshaped as it warms. Hannah Thomas-Peter, Sky News.
Well, as the extreme heat tightens its grip in 3 continents, governments are being forced to come up with adaptation programmes to manage the impacts of climate change. The UK government has released its plans to invest £15 million to support adaptive action. Well, our science and technology editor, Tom Clark, is here with me. First of all, though, Tom, 3 continents, records being broken. What is going on?
That's right. We've got a lot to adapt to. Look at the global outlook. This is extreme heat in the northern hemisphere, and as you were saying there, we've got heat waves on 3 continents now, concurrently in North America, in Europe, and a Chinese record being broken over the weekend. What we're seeing in Europe is one of these heat dome events. In fact, it's similar across the picture, the same kind of heat dome we had in the UK last summer, you'll remember. Look at it here. It's an anticyclone area of very high pressure, low, sluggish winds. The higher the pressure, the warmer the air becomes because it's compressed. That also dries out the land, so it heats up more. And also, low pressure can't get in there to cool things off, and they're held there in place by these great jet stream type movements. Adaptation plan. This is the sort of thing we've got to adapt to, but not just that. Extreme rainfall, droughts associated with it, the costs of that, extreme weather events like storms. The government strategy says all the right things. It is calling for the right kind of strategies and programmes, like new research for adaptation, spending money on getting local authorities talking to each other, health alert systems. But what analysts looking through the detail of the government's plan today are already saying is a lot of this has already been announced, and it also lacks the urgency and clear timetable deadlines that we're going to need to meet. A bit more like a government spinning its wheels rather than hitting the accelerator, one policy expert said to me today, which is what we need given the speed of the climate change that's coming to us. We're at 1.2 degrees around of warming right now. We're heading for 2 degrees plus. What we don't invest in and deal with now and in the not too distant future, we're just passing on much bigger costs, much more damage to the next government, future governments and society.
Tom, thank you. Now, a new drug has been found to slow the progression of Alzheimer's, meaning the disease could become more treatable. Experts have hailed it as a new era, but there's a concern that the NHS is not ready to provide the drugs to the hundreds of thousands of people who meet the treatment criteria. Sky's science correspondent Thomas Moore reports.
Can you remember any of these other people on here? Who's these two here?
Paul.
No, that's your sister Rosemary.
Sister Rose.
Yeah. And who's the lady next to her?
The memories are fading as Alzheimer's disease slowly fogs Richard's brain. His son describes it almost as a living bereavement, and until now there's been little that doctors could do. But 2 drugs have now been shown to slow the decline by around a third if treatment is started in the early stages of the disease.
It might be a little bit too late for Dad now with regard to treatment, but I just hope that this news today that the families can benefit and we can slow this condition down and people can get a better life for longer.
New results show an antibody drug called donanemab was able to remove amyloid, a rogue protein, from the brains of people with Alzheimer's. Earlier this year, another drug, lecanemab, was shown to be similarly effective, and there's growing confidence that although the drugs are not a cure, we are at a turning point for one of the most feared diseases of old age.
We saw a slowing of the decline of people being able to do everyday activities by 40%. That is more time to be able to do hobbies, talk about current affairs, drive, manage their finances. We have never before seen treatments that modify the disease. We call them disease-modifying treatments. We have never seen that before until in the last 12 months we now have 2, and that's why we think this is a brand new era for Alzheimer's disease.
An estimated 720,000 people in the UK could meet the criteria to be given one of the 2 new Alzheimer's drugs. But first they have to be diagnosed. This can be done with a special PET brain scanner, but there are only 69 in England, Wales and Northern Ireland, and they're used for cancer 90% of the time. The telltale amyloid protein can also be confirmed with a spinal fluid sample, but there aren't enough specialist skilled staff to carry out this at scale.
Probably 2% of people who might benefit from these drugs would currently be able to get them. But obviously we need to see that change, and we've got time to do it, but now is the time to invest. Now is the time to look differently for the NHS as to how we get these drugs to patients.
The drugs have a small risk of serious side effects, including brain swelling, and patients need to be carefully monitored.
Do you remember who that is?
Yes.
That's the club captain.
Paul will shortly walk the length of Britain to raise money for more research, to find even better treatments that might just make this the last generation to suffer from Alzheimer's disease. Thomas Moore, Sky News in Nottinghamshire.
Ukraine has tonight written to the UN and to the Turkish president urging continued operation of the Black Sea grain shipment deal after Russia halted its participation in the agreement, which allows Ukraine to export its grain. Well, earlier, President Putin blamed Kyiv for an attack on the Kerch bridge, which killed 2 people. The bridge is both strategic and symbolic to Moscow, as our international affairs editor Dominique van Heerden reports.
It's 300 miles from the front line, but that hasn't saved the Kerch Bridge from being attacked for a second time. The road left hanging at a precarious angle. Addressing his security cabinet in Moscow, Vladimir Putin promised retribution.
This is a senseless crime from a military point of view, as the bridge hasn't been used for military transportation for a long time, and it is cruel because innocent civilians have been killed. Russia's response will follow.
The most likely weapons, seaborne unmanned suicide drones that Ukraine's used already against Russian shipping during this war. Simple, say experts, but effective.
They're a boat with a radio control element and a satellite link and a remote control navigation system. It's pretty basic technology, but getting it to work in a combat situation is quite an advanced activity.
The attack is bad news for Russia, both strategically and symbolically. Russia annexed and illegally occupied Crimea in 2014 and occupied this chunk of southern Ukraine after its invasion last year. It has only two routes to supply the peninsula, through the occupied bit of southern Ukraine and over the Kerch bridge here. The bridge is 12 miles long, the longest in both Europe and Russia. There's actually two bridges running parallel to each other, each spanning the Kerch Straits. One is a 4-lane road bridge, the other is a double-track railway bridge. It's both vital and vulnerable. The first attack happened here in October last year, destroying the bridge partially, putting it out of action for months. Now, a second attack has done major damage to it further east at this point here. This was the attack in October, a huge fireball caused, say the Russians, by a truck loaded with explosives. The bridge was only reopened 2 months ago, personally by Vladimir Putin, who regards it as one of his greatest achievements. Something Russia's czars and Soviet leaders dreamed of, he said, but never brought to fruition. The latest strike on the Kerch Bridge is another blow to his prestige. It will almost certainly not be the last. Dominique van Heerden, Sky News.
Despite a backbench rebellion, the government has won a series of votes over their controversial migration legislation aimed at stopping people illegally crossing the Channel. Well, our chief political correspondent, John Craig, is in Westminster. A busy night in Parliament. Certainly, John, what's happening?
Right now, Anna, the House of Lords has just started debating the illegal migration bill again after the House of Commons threw out about a dozen or so amendments in 9 votes. Majorities anywhere between 55 and 99 on issues like human trafficking, the treatment of young detainees, safe routes and so on. Rebellions of around about a dozen or so on those issues, but the government won every vote comfortably, and so it is back in the Lords now. They are expected to sit till well beyond midnight and probably send back 4 or 5 amendments, which the government will have to try and strike out tomorrow. It is expected the bill will eventually go through probably on Wednesday. But tonight there's also a growing backlash over the Bibby Stockholm. That's the big barge the government's proposing to put at Portland on the south coast in Dorset. It's on its way today from Falmouth in Cornwall, and a Tory MP, Chris Loder, West Dorset MP, is saying it's not safe. There's going to be too many people on it, and he's called on Suella Braverman to either to tell it to stop or carry out safety checks. So a row over that tonight on the Tory back benches. Other MPs have complained about it as well. Meanwhile, the so-called ping pong is on again. That bill is back in the Lords. It's just gone back to the Lords, and they're going to sit late and pass more amendments.
John, thank you. The Prime Minister says he's clamping down on low-quality university degrees, which mean young people are being sold a false dream. It's part of a major shake-up of higher education announced by the government and puts a cap on courses with high dropout rates. Our political correspondent Liz Bates has more.
Full of hope for the future, but have some of the students graduating up and down the country today been sold a false dream? Yes, according to the Prime Minister, who wants to see a major shake-up of the university system, imposing a cap on what he calls low-quality degrees.
Part of these reforms, clamping down on low-quality courses, will improve the overall financial sustainability of the system, and that's right. It's right for students, right for the taxpayer, and ultimately will build a better education system.
In the House of Commons, the Education Secretary was under pressure to say which courses were in the firing line.
Data shows that there were 66 providers where fewer than 60% of graduates progressed to high-skilled employment or further study 15 months after graduating. This is not acceptable. careful. A government whose only big idea for our world-leading universities is to put up fresh barriers to opportunity, anxious to keep young people in their place.
Today's announcement has certainly grabbed headlines in friendly newspapers like this one. But if we read between the lines, this is still in its very early stages. At the moment, the government has simply asked the regulator to have a look at the issue and come up with a plan, the main thrust of which will be implemented in 2025, which means this Prime Minister may not be in office when these big promises are delivered. And the sector's representative body says a lot of this work is already going on.
What the government's done is sort of spin something that is already part of the regulatory system as a backstop, as a big crackdown. But I do think government wants to get a headline out of it.
Beyond Westminster, it's students who will feel the effects of these changes. So what do these Leeds graduates make of it all?
If you have a passion and you can study at university, each degree should be seen equally.
It's both the opportunities that you're given and also how much of those opportunities you're able to make use of.
There's no point doing a university degree that you feel as if you're being pushed to do because it looks good and you think you're going to get a job.
More details will be revealed over the summer, when we'll find out if this political theatre will result in real action. Liz Bates, Sky News, Westminster.
The sexual assault trial of Hollywood actor Kevin Spacey has heard evidence from Sir Elton John and his husband David Furnish. The two men confirmed details of a party at their home, which Mr Spacey attended. The actor denies attacking 4 men, including one who says he was grabbed while they were driving to the event. Carlos Alcaraz was crowned the new King of Wimbledon yesterday, but there's also a new prince in town after Henry Searle became the first British boys singles champion at Wimbledon since 1962. The 17-year-old from Wolverhampton beat the 5th seed and is now being called the next Andy Murray. Sky's Becky Johnson has been back to where it all began.
It's been 61 years since a British player last won this. Unseeded Henry Searle took the boys' singles title at Wimbledon without dropping a single set.
It's pretty special being crowned champion here, and didn't have that many expectations coming into the week, but yeah, it was really amazing to be able to win today.
But for those who've watched him rise through the ranks, his success is no surprise. At his local club in Wolverhampton, he was once part of this preschool class. His first coach says even then he stood out.
As soon as Henry walked through the doors and he picked up a racket, I thought, wow, we have a superstar here on our hands. He was already getting 30-shot rallies by the age of 3 years old. He was incredible. He was that good.
She was part of his balmy army of supporters at Wimbledon and hopes this is just the start.
Fingers crossed he could be the next Andy Murray.
It's that hope that's exciting for British tennis.
Henry's definitely one for us to watch. Yeah, I mean, he's now 6th in the world as of this morning. He's left-handed, he's tall, he's got a big serve, he's powerful. So, yeah, definitely one to keep a very close eye on.
In Wolverhampton, players he grew up with are proud.
I think it's really cool because, you know, he's just from here.
It's just an inspiring thing what he's done, obviously.
Here, they'll be cheering him on, whatever comes next. Becky Johnson, Sky News, Wolverhampton.
Well, that was Sky News at 10. Coming up, we'll take a first look at tomorrow's newspapers in the press preview, including this story on the front page of The Eye, with news of that breakthrough drug for the treatment of Alzheimer's disease, which could be available on the NHS, the paper says, by 2025. Well, tonight we're joined by the political editors of The Guardian and The Sun, Bakura and Harry Cole. Back in just a moment. Well, this is Sky News. In just a moment, the press preview. A first look at what is on the front pages. First, though, a reminder of our top stories this evening. An undercover Sky News investigation in Myanmar has revealed how a secret jungle hospital is treating fighters and civilians suffering devastating injuries in the ongoing civil war. Thousands of people have been evacuated as wildfires get close to Athens, and record temperatures are recorded on 3 continents. And experts have praised a new Alzheimer's drug which slows the progression of the disease. Well, hello there. You are watching the press preview, a first look at what is on the front pages. Time then to see what's making the headlines with the political editors of The Guardian and The Sun, Pippa Clura and Harry Cole, with us from now until just before midnight, and lovely to see both of you. As ever, let's check out the front pages, though, first of all, starting with The Telegraph, which leads with comments from the Defence Secretary that the UK must pay for tanks, but not more troops to help Ukraine in its fight against Russia. The Eye reports on the discovery of the new Alzheimer's drug, which it's believed could slow the progression of Alzheimer's disease if discovered early enough, and may be available on the NHS, the paper says, as soon as 2025. Indeed, Pippa's paper, The Guardian, says there's heavy pressure to get the drug approved and onto the market as soon as possible. The Daily Mail calls it a turning point in the fight against Alzheimer's, while the Times call it a new era for Alzheimer's. After fresh protests in London, the Metro tells Just Stop Oil campaigners to just shove off. The FT hears that Microsoft could fall foul of EU competition laws for bundling its Teams video conferencing programme together with its Office software. The Sun reports that TV personality Melanie Sykes has been diagnosed with Tourette's syndrome. And The Star has a story about hackers' efforts to uncover the truth, in heavy quotes, about UFOs and aliens. Well, a quick reminder, by scanning the QR code that you can see on screen during the programme, you can check out those front pages for yourself while you listen to our guests. So let's head straight to Pippa Clura and Harry Cole. And Pippa, plenty of coverage of this new Alzheimer's drug, the second one. It's an indication, really, how desperate people are to see some progression with this truly terrible disease.
Yeah, some progression, but also, I mean, scientists have been working on drugs for dementia and Alzheimer's for years, and there hasn't been a significant breakthrough really in the last 2 decades. So the fact that this drug donanemab, I probably haven't pronounced that properly, Anna, you'll be better at that than me, I'm sure. But the fact that they've developed this, it's not a cure, but it is a treatment, and it does substantially slow cognitive decline. They suggest by about 35% in people with Alzheimer's. Now, of course, Alzheimer's is a type of dementia. There are other types of dementia, such as vascular dementia, which this doesn't affect. And there are significant side effects, but nevertheless, it's the first really substantial change and development that we've had in Alzheimer's treatment. And when you consider, I mean, we all anecdotally in our own lives know people that have or have had Alzheimer's. I know close members of my family have, and the numbers are growing all the time as the population gets, as we have a sort of a growing elderly population. The pressure that puts on social care and on the NHS, and will do increasingly in the future, is immense. So not just from obviously a sort of, a humane perspective, and the fact that people will be able to manage their own affairs for longer and remember their family members for longer, but also from a sort of a public services perspective, and making sure that that our health and social care systems can cope and don't collapse in future. This is potentially a really significant breakthrough. So really good news all around on this.
Yes, and the Director of Research at Alzheimer's Research UK is quoted by The Guardian, in fact, saying it was critical for regulators to act promptly to avoid patients experiencing waits for this clinically effective treatments, saying we now have 2 potentially life-changing Alzheimer's treatments on the horizon. We need to see rapid regulatory decisions. The question is whether, given the numbers of people in this country, Harry, who actually have early stage Alzheimer's, whether there'd be the availability for this treatment to operate in this country.
Papers reporting tomorrow potentially 750,000 people this could benefit, but actually Britain is languishing in the sort of global league tables for the sophisticated scanners that are required to detect early onset Alzheimer's early enough for this drug to be as effective as it could be. In fact, we only have 88 of these scanners in the country, and actually it's not just about getting these drugs through the regulatory bodies, it's making sure the NHS is actually prepared to be able to make the most of them and extract the most benefit from these drugs once they are approved, and I presume they will be approved at this rate, given the sort of glowing final reports from the manufacturers. But yeah, no, investment is going to have to come for more scanners, which 88 across the entire country doesn't seem that many on my back of the envelope maths to me.
Yes, first of all, to discover if you have this mild cognitive impairment, and then get these monthly infusions of donanemab and the other drug that we mentioned as well. Let's move on, shall we? Harry, I'm going to stick with you if you don't mind, heading to a story that's got your name on with an exclusive. Sunak eyes an early cabinet clear-out. What do you call early?
Well, if some people I've been speaking to tonight are to be believed, it could come as soon as this week. Ben Wallace, the Defence Secretary, announced on Sunday officially that he was ready to go at the next reshuffle. He's not going to fight the next election. He doesn't want to be part of the sort of election campaign as a cabinet minister if he's not going to fight his own seat. So he told the Prime Minister a few weeks ago that he's off. As and when the Prime Minister would like to reshuffle his team. Now, Wallace's people point to a slightly hostile briefing in Saturday's papers, basically revealing this, which led to him to then go public with his claims of his departure in the Sunday papers, which has actually sped up a sort of debate that's been happening in Downing Street about when to reshuffle the team before the next election. They've probably got one go at getting the sort of cabinet, election ready. Now, because Wallace has basically said, I'm off, that's a serious proper role in cabinet that is up for grabs now. So to avoid perhaps a summer of speculation and possibly to distract from what every Tory I've spoken to thinks is going to be a triple by-election defeat on Thursday, there's definitely a conversation that's been had in Downing Street of perhaps maybe move this reshuffle that was penciled in for September to perhaps maybe as soon as this weekend. No decisions made. I think the likelihood is they'll still go long, but there's definitely an element of a reshuffle being in play in the coming days.
Yeah, that's fascinating. I mean, the only problem is it looks a bit reactionary if indeed the by-elections in Uxbridge, Selby and that Somerset seat of Somerton and Frome go disastrously wrong for the Conservative Party. What's your bet, Pippa?
Well, I think I've spoken to people people in Downing Street and in government over the last week or so, and by process of deduction, it seems most likely that there will be a reshuffle this side of the summer, not least because if you wait until after the summer, as Harry says, there's obviously speculation over the course of the summer months, but you potentially are appointing somebody just before party political conferences, which makes it very difficult for them to catch up. Generally, they prefer having people in post, learning their brief, having the time to get their sort of feet under the table over the summer months. And then if they wait till after party conferences, then you're in a position where you've just had a minister stand up and make all these policy pledges in their area, and then you're replacing them in their job with somebody else, within weeks. So neither of those look like particularly credible options. So I've always thought that it's much more likely that it will come this side of the summer. And of course, nothing better than reshuffle to try and reset the narrative after what could be potentially very difficult by-election results for the Prime Minister on Thursday. So I think all eyes definitely on Friday.
Yeah, and just your bet for who might replace Ben Wallace. I mean, one suggestion that the Foreign Secretary, James Cleverly, might be moved. Kind of a demotion, but we are at war. Harry, your bet?
I think it would be someone with close links to Sunak and a Treasury mindset. There's lots of arguments and debates, as we'll discuss later on, I think, and in some of the other front pages about the future of armed forces spending. Treasury and the MOD have been loggerheads for as long as I've been a journalist. I wonder whether Mr. Sunak, the Treasury man, will put another Treasury man, perhaps John Glenn, into the Treasury, and that that doesn't necessarily mean he's Chief Secretary to the Treasury now. If you move the Foreign Secretary, that's a big move. You move the Home Secretary, that's a big move. I wonder whether the reshuffle will be a slightly a grade below sort of big officers of state.
And just a name quickly, Pippa. I'm only going to see if you got it right, if there's one soon.
I think John Glenn isn't a bad bet, particularly since he was tweeting out pictures of himself with serving military in his constituency in Salisbury not too long ago. But the other one that really wants it is Tom Tugendhat, the Security Minister, of course, a former army officer himself. Whether Sunak thinks he's ready for promotion at that level, we'll have to wait and see.
Yeah, we will, indeed. We'll mark it down, see if you're right later on. And you teased ahead to another story in the later part of our programme, Harry, as well. Pippa, let's stay with you. Your story on Keir Starmer and this decision not to scrap the two-child benefit cap if Labour wins power.
Yeah, so this is actually following on sort of a day two after an interview that Starmer gave at the weekend, in which he said that it was not going to be Labour policy to scrap the two-child benefit cap, which obviously for a lot of people within the Labour movement was deeply problematic, not just morally, but also because there's been a variety of studies which suggested that the policy actually doesn't work. It was introduced initially devised by George Osborne in the austerity era and brought in 2017. And the idea of it was to incentivise either people back into work or to work longer hours, or indeed to not have so many children. But it doesn't seem to have worked on either of those fronts. In fact, it seems like the main outcome is that it's driven more people into poverty. However, Labour is in a position where they're very reluctant to make any public spending promises when they want to present themselves as having being very, very committed to fiscal responsibility, and making any public spending pledges, even something like this, which would potentially cost £1.5 billion a year, is not something they want to do unless they can say how it would be funded. They're obviously all anxious about the prospect of the Conservatives totting up all those, if they were to do that, totting up all those potential promises and saying that they're unfunded, uncosted, same old Labour, all that sort of thing, when they're trying very, very hard, particularly after the difficult time the Conservatives have had in the economy in recent times, to show that they are prudent, they are responsible, and that the economy would be in safe hands under them. So it's wider than just this particular issue, problematic though that is for Starmer, and though that's causing split right at the top of his party. It's more for them, for Starmer and the leadership, about setting the tone and making it clear that they're not prepared to do anything that's unfunded.
Yes, all big positioning ahead of you know what. Lots of photographs on the front pages and insights too about the heat in Europe, including the Daily Telegraph, which pictures the Balearic island of Menorca. A festival, in fact, but the Metro's decided to pick up on Just Stop Oil Eco Mob, as they put it, bringing the capital to a halt, just shove off. Do you think it focuses the mind, the temperatures we're seeing in Europe, Harry, and makes people more supportive of the direct action we've had in this country?
No, I don't think so. I think actually, forgive me for saying, I think the heatwave coverage of Europe has been completely fantastically overblown. It's not the first time it's been a bit hot in Europe and temperatures have reached 40 degrees. It's almost an element of hysteria about.
Yeah, but it's nearly 50. It's going to be nearly 50.
But yeah, it's a heat wave. It doesn't necessarily mean that people are suddenly going to allow, Tarquin and Tabitha to sit in front of their cars while they're trying to get to work. There's no connection between the two. People are finally waking up to Just Stop Oil and their ridiculous tactics. It seems like the police are finally doing something. And, I think you're seeing the reaction of the public there as people sort of take action into their own hands. People are fed up with this. They don't want it. And they don't like being lectured by someone sitting in the street.
Yeah, but if it hit 50 here, they might take action as well. Let's be honest about it.
But when that happens, let's have that conversation. But that's not going to happen.
Well, wildfire pictures there in Greece. Pippa was violently shaking her head through all of that. I haven't got time to go to it. I need to go to a break, but we will return to that, I've no doubt, later this evening. Lots still to come. The government, with its plans to allow more foreign bricklayers into the country, discussing that in just a moment.
We aim to be the best and most trusted place for news. Greg Milam, Sky News, Manchester.
I'm Katie Spencer and I'm Sky News' arts and entertainment correspondent. When you think of Glastonbury, it's mud you want and music. They're going to cross to us live in a minute. Okay. Thank you so much. Brad Pitt is now a prolific producer behind the scenes.
It's not a mystery to me. We always were capable of doing this.
Oh, they're wonderful children as an audience.
Who did that? Maverick here on the red carpet. I'm so excited, Tom Cruise. This is the story of the night. It's the little independent film that could. We take you to the heart of the stories that shape our world.
Nor have I ever struck any woman in my life.
There's this illusion of power.
Are you feeling well?
I remember covering the Oscars and that now infamous moment, the Will Smith slap. Nobody could quite believe that it happened. You can tell from these crowds just how excited people are for the return of Pride.
These actors playing the lead roles were born long after the Sex Pistols broke up.
Are you pleased that you did say yes to the job?
I've never regretted it.
As a team, we've interviewed some of the biggest stars in the world. It can be incredibly surreal being swept up in their world, but we try to give you an honest sense of how these people really are.
Okay, I'll talk to you.
Don't leave me.
Yeah, okay.
There's no easy goodies. There's no easy baddies.
I've had a great time here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye. Well, welcome back. You are watching the press preview with me once again, Pippa Crewer and Harry Cole from The Sun and The Guardian and The Sun. Get it the right way around. Apologies, Pippa. Let's go to the Daily Telegraph, and I'm going to go to you, Harry, on this. You've already alluded to it. This is Ben Wallace effectively acknowledging that, yes, the numbers of fully trained troops in the UK are falling, but as he put it, they can't go to war with a pitchfork. They need kit, and it's expensive. So it's all about the sums again, isn't it, really, as they release the Defence Command paper tomorrow.
Yes, so this update of Britain's place in the world, a sort of review of the war in Ukraine and how it affects our armed forces, will be published. And I think actually it will take into account a lot of what happened to Russia's troops, meant to be one of the most feared armed forces in the world, but have been, found utterly wanting at times during the invasion of Ukraine. And that's because of a lack of sophisticated kit, a lack of training, a lack of joined-up fighting, a lack of information warfare, electronic warfare. And actually, Wallace is making the point in a sort of departing, almost swan song interview. It wasn't just with the Telegraph; it was an all-round briefing for the papers tomorrow, ahead of this command paper. That actually, look, he had been battling with Rishi Sunak when he was Chancellor for more money for the armed forces, and ultimately Jeremy Hunt, who replaced, who's now the Chancellor. And there was some additional money, but not enough to simply undo a planned cut of around 10,000 troops. in the size of the British Army down to its lowest size in a long, long time of 72,000. So he's basically saying, look, you got to deal with the hand you're dealt, and it's, you know, as much as it would be nice to say no, we're not going to take the army down to that size, it's more important to have a ruthlessly and properly equipped and trained forces rather than a larger force with dodgy gear, as proven by the Russians.
Yeah. On to the Sun. Pippa, for you, where should we get our workers from? The suggestion that you know, key jobs like builders, roofers, carpenters and plasterers are being added to the so-called shortage occupations list, which means they can come from abroad. The suggestion is they should be trained here in the UK. The debate rages again.
Yes, and this is actually Harry's story with one of his colleagues. And well, no, I'm very happy to talk about it. It's obviously an issue which has been it's obviously been an issue which has been ongoing for some time. This which really sort of came to a head over Brexit. This sort of conflict between importing workers to do particular jobs, skilled or otherwise, and training up our own workforce. And the sort of the recognition that in some sectors, for example, in fruit picking and farming and so on, that British workers didn't want to do those jobs, and by cutting off people coming over from places like Eastern Europe, we were putting farmers in a difficult position. And the government's previously made provisions within the seasonal worker scheme to have people working on farms, for example. The building industry is another one. And anybody that's had any building work done or neighbours that have building work done knows that it's got dramatically more expensive, not least just the cost of importing goods, but also labour, because of course our market was absolutely supported by predominantly Eastern European tradesmen and tradespeople coming over from Eastern Europe, and that hasn't happened post-Brexit. People have gone back, and there's absolutely an economic nationalism argument that we should be training up people and companies should be investing in British workers to do these jobs. But that, I suppose, is a longer-term thing, and it hasn't happened thus far. And I think there are short-term issues with gaps that need to be plugged now. Jeremy Hunt even, and Stuart Ramsay have come to this agreement in order to keep this sector of the economy ticking over this time. But the pressure will be on them to think longer term and try and address some of the skills shortages that exist in
Pippa,
the UK.
thank you. Harry, I promise I'll let you talk about that one next time. Both of you, lovely to see you. Thank you both very much indeed. Thank you.